coach, and I'm on faculty at the voice department at DePaul University.
And Nick P.
Hi, I am Nick Phan, and I'm a tenor, and I sing all over the place under normal circumstances. And I am one of the co-founders of this wonderful organization, and I'm the organization's artistic director.
Excellent. So with any organization like this, we need to know the origin story. So I'm assuming none of you were bitten by radioactive spiders. So who would like to tell us the origin story, how CAIC got started more than 10 years ago?
Well, I like starting the origin story anyhow, because I enjoy being able to tell people that this all started as a joke years and years ago. So this is CAIC's 10th anniversary, but we're sort of technically a successor organization to a for-profit partnership called Collaborative Works, which is where we get the name of our annual festival. That was an organization that I started with Shannon and with a third colleague of ours named Jared Mosby. And it started with a visit to Ann Arbor by Shannon McGinnis, and she and I were hanging out and talking about what was next in our lives. I was figuring out what to do after the end of my degree, and Shannon was teaching at an institution and thinking about, moving on to the next step in her career. So at some point before she got in her car to drive home, she turned to me and said, we should just move to Chicago and start a collaborative pianist company. And she laughed, and I laughed, and she got in her car and drove home. And I went back to my apartment, and when I got there, there was a message on my answering machine from Shannon, not in any kind of a joking way, but in the very intense way that Shannon can have when she's, taken on a mission, saying, you know what, I think we should do it. And we did. And my colleagues know that I tend to be the more skeptical, pessimistic member of our trio. So I was sort of waiting to see, will all the pieces fall into place? And they did. We brought in Jared, who was living in Texas at the time, I think. And, we found an office space and the finances worked. And, my partner wanted to move to Chicago too. And it all just sort of fell into place. And we started a for-profit company where we just sort of pooled clients and office space, and we were teaching some piano students, and we did all sorts of things. We played for Suzuki violin classes and for church services, and if someone needed a pianist, we did it. And then we got to the point where we realized we were running into a wall and we couldn't quite do all the things that we wanted to accomplish. And then Shannon came to the rescue again with the idea to turn our for-profit partnership into a nonprofit. And I'll let her take the story from there.
But the two of you were students together, is that right?
Yeah, did we overlap?
We overlapped at the University of Michigan by a couple year, or a year probably. You were not in the collaborative program at the time.
That's right.
You started that program after I left.
Yeah.
And our friend Jared Mosby also did the master's degree program at the University of Michigan with Martin Katz. So that's how we all intersected.
Mm-hmm.
And I love hearing Nick tell that story, because I remember it as kind of this time in my life when I had this wonderful teaching position with wonderful colleagues and students, but I knew that I was living in a really small town at the time, and I knew that I wanted to be in a larger city, and I really wanted to get my feet wet kind of really in the world instead of those sort of comfortable confines of academia. And it just was fortuitous that Nick Hutchinson happened to be at a crossroads at that point. Our friend Jared was also at a crossroads. So it really worked out that we found each other and sort of supported each other in building this business and getting our feet wet in Chicago. I think that worked pretty well for about 4 years or so. And then I got a bee in my bonnet. I decided that, we all were doing just about anything we could, piano related, coach related, to pay the bills. And I knew, always had known that my love is art song, that if I could do anything all of the time in my career, it would be to play recitals and to talk about poetry, to talk about the intersection of poetry and music, and to spend time in that milieu, for lack of a better word. And because we were a for-profit business, because we had to make money, I don't know if y'all know, there's not a ton of money in recital playing these days and in art song. So we weren't really able to do as much of that. I wasn't able to do as much of that as I would have liked to be doing. So literally, I was living in Andersonville. I had about a 40-minute train ride from downtown, and I was on the train and frustrated. What's next? What am I going to do? How do I fix this issue that I'm having? And so I went home and I literally just sat down and wrote a mission statement about what would my ideal organization look like. And it looked something like what CAIC would come to be. I knew that I wanted to be able to shepherd an organization and be involved with an organization that really devoted itself to the art of song exclusively and without compromising that mission. At the same time that all of this was stirring in my mind and I'm writing mission statements and figuring out how could we make this next phase work, I get a call from my dear friend, Nicholas Phan, also a friend from the University of Michigan, who had the idea that he wanted to start some sort of summer festival. And he also, a fellow song lover, a man true to my heart, also wanted to find ways to make more of a lasting impression in the recital world. And we thought, well, what if we could start a summer festival or any type of festival that would really rally around this rarefied and special repertoire? And so we sort of combined forces, we expanded that mission, and I talked to Nick Hutchinson, would you like to get involved? Jared Mosby, our good friend, was already on his way to another phase of his career. So we sort of parted ways on that front, but all in a very good way. Everything was fine. I wrote articles of incorporation for this new organization, and they were accepted and approved right away. And then I wrote our 501c3 application for nonprofit status, and that came through without a hitch, a lot more quickly than we had anticipated. And then we were off and running. And then it was time to plan an event. And here we are 10 years later.
So what was that first event?
It was a house concert. I don't know if someone else would like to tell that story. Nick Phan, as the artistic director, would you like to share stories about that? I've talked to you.
No, you didn't talk too much at all. You tell that story beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a house concert actually up in Glencoe, at your husband's parents' house, if I remember correctly.
Exactly right.
It featured a tenor named Matthew Newland and a soprano named Juliet Petrus.
Yes.
And you played, Shannon, and also your husband played, if I remember correctly.
And Nick played as well.
Yeah.
And Nick played, that's true.
It was a family.
I played for your husband, yes.
That's right.
And I stood in a corner and was really stressed out the entire time.
But
why were you stressed out?
You know, it was the first time, you know, I was really used to being a performer at that point, and it was the first time that I was so heavily involved in something that I don't know, that I was gonna sort of stand on the presenter side and say, performers, go do your thing, and you have to let go. And there's a letting go there that was just something I was completely unaccustomed to. And it was a little anxiety in doing it first. And it's not because I don't trust these amazing people, because they're fantastic, and I knew that, but it was just, you know.
Well, and I think there's a certain element in all of this that we've all discovered that, you know, really having to dig into what goes on behind the scenes of a performance is just a completely different world, that there are so many things that as an audience member or even a performer that you take for granted, like getting a program when you walk in, or there are all these wonderful people on stage, that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make that work. And I remember that for being an important performance, because that was also the debut of Judy Freilich's amazing, magical, artistic cookies, which have become the centerpiece of so many of our performance events over the years.
It's a lot of the reason why people come to our concerts.
It's true.
It's up there on the list.
So,
I mean, we spend so much of our lives and training to perform and to do the thing, and kind of sitting on the other side of that for the first time was really jarring, because you know that it's always important that a performance go well, but as a performer, you know how to control your end of things in order to make sure that that happens. And as a presenter, you have to let go of that, and that was really, I don't know, that was jarring. It was a learning lesson. It's part of the steep learning curve that we've experienced over here.
So in addition to Judy's cookie, of course, what, for each of you, what are some of the early successes of the organization that kept your motivation and your drive to keep moving this organization forward?
Who wants to go?
I will jump in. You know, we've mentioned the University of Michigan as being such an important part of our origin story, and also such a pivotal part in each of our individual careers. And so we've been fortunate from the very beginning to have all of our mentor, Martin Katz, the wonderful pianist Martin Katz. He played on our very first concert, outside of that house concert, our very first stage concert. And also presided over master classes for us early on. And we as an organization have been committed from the very beginning of providing these masterclass opportunities to participants in and around Chicago, from in and around Chicago, completely free of charge. And we're able to do that because of a really loyal, enthusiastic, and dedicated audience who attends those events. So I've been really proud of the fact that we made this educational commitment from the very beginning, and have stuck with that. And having someone of the caliber of Martin Katz to be really pivotal in that formation from the early years, I count as a true success. I think we're all really proud to have him as a friend, a loyal friend to us on a lot of levels.
Yeah, and he's such a legend in this community, that's
Yes,
for sure.
exactly.
Nick's early successes?
I echo the very first festival, which are the two big Schubert song cycles with Jesse Bloomberg and Martin Katz, that for sure. I also remember really fondly having Michelle DeYoung and Kevin Murphy perform on one of our festivals, also because Michelle DeYoung gave a brilliant masterclass the next day, and I was expecting her to be an amazing performer, and I didn't realize that she was also an amazing teacher. And one of my vivid memories from that day was her having one of our VCMFs. I mean, he was hopping up and down on one foot and trying to sing while he was making a hand gesture. I mean, she had him doing 5 different things, and it was hilarious to watch, and it worked amazingly well. And she was just brilliantly creative like that with everyone that she taught. And it's really, I'd always find it a wonderful thing to discover someone who's as brilliant a teacher as they are a performer. I think that's a really rare combination.
Yeah, she sang at the library, didn't she?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and she sang. Oh, that's right. She sang the El Garcia pictures on that recital. That was
Extraordinary.
Marvelous. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nick Phan, are you still with us?
I'm still here. My camera is having some issues.
Okay.
Oh no.
It's okay. You can hear me though, yes?
Yes. We can hear you just fine. And while you're having camera issues, any early successes, either as a performer or as an observer?
Yeah, early successes. I'm a little distracted by the camera. I'm not gonna lie, guys. Sorry. Welcome to our
Technology.
maiden voyage of this technology, everybody.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Thank you for bearing with us. Early successes, I have to say, our first 3 festivals actually all stand out to me as early successes. That it was amazing, I think, to be able to. Oh, my tech advisor is coming to help me.
It's helpful to have one of those in-house.
It is. I have one too.
I have one too, yes.
Yes. Anyway, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. We had 3 wonderful festivals, and here I'm back. Thank you.
Here you are.
My gosh. You guys, the learning never stops here, even 10 years on. I'm going to consider that an early success, the fact that we got our camera back. Yeah, so those first 3 festivals, I think it just was, it was amazing to me that they went as well as they did, with considering we had so little experience. Each time we finished one, I just had this feeling of, oh wow, we made it to the finish line. It actually went well. Our audiences seemed to really enjoy it. People came. And I think those were big successes because they felt like big lessons learned, and they felt like big lessons learned gracefully and without catastrophe, and not the hard way, quote unquote. And I think that we were really lucky in that regard. And I'm also, I don't know, those three events really, I feel like, solidified us as a team. I mean, we often refer to ourselves internally as sort of, the CAIC family. And it really, I think it's those experiences of putting those things together, understanding what was on the line artistically, financially, organizationally, and that really kind of cemented us all together. And I think it laid the groundwork and the foundation for what has come since and what continues to happen.
And I think it was right after that, I think it was the 4th festival was the first time that I attended, and I got sucked right in, of course.
That's so what we do, Frank.
Yeah. So all 3 of you have actually, of course, performed with CAIC, either on leader lounges or certainly at the festivals. Do you have any favorite performances, favorite works that you've performed, favorite artists that you've worked with? Shannon, you go.
Of course you would start with me. It's so difficult to choose.
It's like choosing your favorite child, right?
It is. It really, you're joking, really true. I just feel so fortunate through this organization to have had the opportunity to meet and work with artists that I've admired from afar. Several artists that I didn't know before, but that Nick Phan so beautifully brought into our lives. That it's really hard to choose one. I will say someone that's been on my mind, or a performance that has been on my mind a lot lately, was a festival performance several years ago, and I'm sorry I can't remember. The years all kind of blend together, especially now in 2020. Like, where are we? But a performance with Laquita Mitchell of the Hermit Songs, Samuel Barber's Hermit Songs.
At the Poetry Foundation.
This one was actually at the Logan Center, the Performance Penthouse. But I think we did do a Poetry Foundation concert that same week.
I'm thinking of the Emily Dickinson songs.
Yes,
that was at the Poetry Foundation.
Exactly. Right. And I love those pieces, always have, and I love Laquita's singing. There was just really something special about preparing the pieces with her and then performing them because of the history of them, of Leontine Price's legendary performance. And I had never really had the experience before of being with an artist who carried the weight, the blessed weight, like not oppressive, but of this legendary performance from this legendary woman who was obviously a mentor, and taking that out on stage with her. The energy from Laquita that day for me was really moving in that way. And I'll never forget that experience. And it was the first time she had performed the Hermit songs live, and that they should be a staple of her repertoire. She's beautiful in them. So I remember that quite fondly. I remember all of my performances with all of the artists quite fondly, but that one's been on my mind a lot lately. Of course, any opportunity I have to make music with the dear Nick Phan is also always a treat. So
that is mutual.
Yes, thank you.
So Nick Hutchinson, what about you?
Well, I am fortunate in that I have fewer performances to choose from, just because I tend to perform less than these two fine people, just to preserve my own sanity as we're trying to make things work behind the scenes. But I will say, hands down, it was the festival that was devoted to the Schumanns and Johannes Brahms, and being able to do forehand works with Myra Huang, who's going to be rejoining us this year for the festival. And that's one of these things where I think more than any other musical collaboration, you are quite literally sitting attached to another person, and it has the potential to be a very physically and musically awkward kind of interaction. You're not sitting where you normally sit to play your instrument, and you're constantly colliding with your partner and having to work out whose hand is going to go over and whose hand is going to go under. And she's brilliant, and I felt like I was a better musician after being able to collaborate with her, even for just 3 or 4 days. So I remember that very fondly. We did the Brahms Liebeslieder waltzes, and the Schumann, I can't remember what we did, but we did
Spanishes.
2. Yes,
Spanishes
thank you.
Liederspiel.
Yeah.
Those were special. That was really fun.
That was.
Mhm.
I felt very spoiled that week because I was singing with so many dear, dear friends. And it's so rare to actually, I don't know, I mean, it's singing chamber music like that with among singers, along with, it's very similar to the whole piano forehands experience. I mean, it's so intimate, and to be able to sing with people you care about as much as I care about those people, it was luxurious.
And that's always so evident from the audience as well. I mean, it's always so clear that the people on stage know and like each other, not just as musicians, but just as people. That always really reads to the audience. And also because we are frequently in such intimate spaces, and you can't fake that. It's very clear what's going on stage. So Nick, Phan, your
Actually,
top 8 favorites, I guess.
Before I get to my favorites, but since we're talking about that particular festival and those concerts, I actually learned a really valuable lesson at those concerts. We had, the previous year, we'd done a festival focused on the centenary of Benjamin Britten's birth. And I was thinking, oh gosh, that's very avant-garde that we're doing Benjamin Britten, especially, I mean, nearly 10 years ago, that really did feel very avant-garde for some reason. And because his music is not often featured, shall we say, on programs, because people are afraid of programming it. And so I thought, oh gosh, we're going to go back to this sort of, staple repertoire that's tried in like a standard repertoire. And I was having a conversation with actually the director of programming at and artistic planning at Carnegie Hall before we embarked upon that Schumann Brahms festival, and I was describing this to him, and I said, I'm excited because we'll do some standard repertoire, which I think will be comfortable for everybody. And he said, you have to realize something, that when it comes to vocal chamber music and recital music, because it is so rarely performed, there is no such thing as a standard repertoire. Not for audiences, because they almost never hear it live. And that really set off a light bulb in my head, because A, it was shocking. It also shook me, because it made me realize how I was approaching everything as a music student in terms of programming at CAIC. And of course, we are so, when we're in conservatory, we are constantly studying the songs of Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, and we think that that's normal, but that music rarely leaves the conservatory in terms of the performance stage. And there are, of course, these wonderful recordings of singers of yesteryear doing them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that audiences today are familiar with it. And that actually tipped me off going into that festival thinking I have to treat this almost as if it's new music in terms of the way we discuss it with our audiences. And even though there may be people who are familiar with it, and there will be many people who are not. And it also made me realize going forward that we have a bit of a carte blanche. If there's no standard repertoire, that means that we kind of have more freedom than most classical music organizations to be adventurous, because basically everything is going to be an adventure anyway. So we don't have to be hamstrung by being afraid of trying to appease audience members. I mean, we want our audience members to be happy, but I mean, in terms of advance, like scaring people off, we don't need to be afraid of scaring people off. The way we can draw people in is we just keep doing what we're doing and doing it well and make sure that people have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, and the other wonderful thing about that is that some of the things that we've done that from our perspective are the most adventurous and out there, things that we've done with actors, things that we've done with choreographers and dancers and projections and living composers and modern music, that's actually been some of our most successful and most, you know, audience loved performances. So we really are able to do everything without feeling like, oh, now we're getting too adventurous for the people who are going to come and hear these performances. It's great.
But so often the people that come to our concerts are fearless themselves, and they have an idea what they're in for. You mentioned the concert. What was it? Was that at the Ruth Page Center when we had the dancer and the projections? And I remember when we were talking about that in the planning of that, and I was thinking, oh boy, I don't know if you know, if we're going to be able to pull this off. I don't know how our audience is going to react, etc. And it was, you know, it was spectacular. And what was that? It was one of the early concerts I went to. Was at the Logan Center. I think Eighth Blackbird was playing.
The Barrio, was it the folk songs?
Yeah, yes. I remember seeing it on the program and thinking, okay, let's see what happens. And it was, you know, it was delicious. It was spectacular.
That's especially also a standout performance, I think.
Yeah, and
with
especially
Jennifer Johnson
in that tiny little space. That tiny little space, you know, hearing, you know, the experience was so visceral because those instruments were, you know, in such close proximity to the other performers and to the audience, and it worked. It just worked. So, Nick Phan.
You're not letting me off the hook, are you?
I'm not letting you off the hook. No.
Actually, that performance of the Barrio folk songs, I mean, this is kind of easy because they're all my favorite performances, really. And I do mean that. I'm not trying to sound saccharine. That performance, I remember being so impressed and being so grateful to Jen, because Jen Johnson Cano worked so hard on those songs. She performed them beautifully. I was so grateful to the members of Eighth Blackbird who came and joined us for that and brought their expertise to it as well. But the thing that I remember blew my mind away was when Jen got up to introduce those pieces, she told the story about how she'd called the Armenian consulate in order to figure out how to pronounce and get a translation of one of the songs. And I just thought, you're going way above and beyond. Thank you.
Yeah, I think not everyone is probably aware of what the process is like that during the week of a festival and all of the moving parts, not just sort of logistically in planning the concerts, but artists flying in and being housed in various places, and then rehearsals like mad. And a lot of these artists are, God bless them, like performing repertoire that maybe they've never performed before, like Jen with those folk songs, and just diving in with gusto. And I think something that is evident in the performances is this freshness and this sort of excitement about, you know, we've worked so hard very quickly in a short period of time to put it all together and then to be able to share it. And I think one of the reasons it's so difficult to pick a favorite is because that energy is around all of it, particularly when when you're a physical part of it, that it's just palpable, and it's so exhausting. I think we're always just, we need a week off after the festival. And things, please don't think things always go smoothly behind the scenes. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress, but we keep coming back for more because of that end result and just the way that it feels ultimately to have been part of it.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments of a festival always is when we generally all go out after the last concert, because it's this, you have this magnificent energy from all of these concerts, but at the same time, it's like, oh dear God, we made it.
Exactly.
So Nick, you're still not off the hook. Some of the favorite things that you've performed.
Favorite things that I perform. Oh, now that's even harder because
Good.
I have the distinct honor and privilege to be able to choose what everybody gets to do in these things, including myself. It's, oh gosh, it's a tough one to pick. Gosh, sorry, that is so difficult. One of the things actually that was, that is a favorite for personal reasons is getting to do what was our first co-commission of a new work. And part of that is because sometimes you do a commission of something and do the world premiere and then you never see that piece again, or you don't get a second crack at it. And world premiere performances are so stressful. There's never enough rehearsal time, and it just never feels, it rarely feels like it goes good enough. Like you're doing justice to the piece on the first go of a new piece. And I mean, it's extra important because you want the composers to be happy. And while the premiere of that piece that happened elsewhere went really well, I felt so happy to be able to come back to it, particularly in Chicago for us, and be able to breathe different layers of life into it. And I mean, Shannon, I loved working with you on it as well. And I probably drove you nuts in the premiere.
Was that the Missy Mazzoli piece?
It was the Missy Mazzoli cycle, Songs from the Operas, in which she had adapted 2 arias from Proving Up, and which I believe Lyric was supposed to do this season, and 1 aria from Breaking the Waves, which actually, if all goes according to plan, I'll get to do that whole piece in Houston in the spring. Fingers crossed. But it was, I mean, her writing is amazing, and I had been a fan of her music for so long from afar, and so it was really a privilege and great fun to be able to actually dive into some of her music myself for the first time. And again, that experience of just knowing that we could bring it to Chicago for a second performance and give it a regional premiere and have some, life with it, that felt really luxurious and very special.
So one of the things that first drew me into CAIC was the whole concert experience, being in a small, intimate space, being very close to the artist. But then also one of the things that I've always loved is having the little reception afterwards, where you actually get to meet, of course, other members of the audience, but also meet and chat with the performers. Was that someone's particular idea? Was that a model taken from another organization? What was the genesis of that concept?
I remember it being sort of part of the mission that we wanted for our audiences to be able not to feel this separation between them and the performers. Nick Hutchinson, I jumped on you, I'm sorry.
No, I was actually going to say it's been long enough that I can barely remember really making the decision. But I think initially we did a lot of house concerts, and we were thinking that might be a bigger part of things than I think it happens to be at the moment. But that certainly went naturally with, someone's going to invite all of these people to their home. They're not going to say, okay, they've stopped playing, so now get out of my house. So that really, because if we were talking about the very first concert that we ever did, and, there were a huge number of people in their home, and they stayed for a very long time. And I think that's my favorite part of it, is that I don't think there's been a single time that we've done that where we haven't had to herd some people out at the end, or we have the security guards who work at the venue that we're using who are just gently trying to coax us out of the space. It's a fantastic part of it.
You know, some of my,
No, I was
sorry,
just going to say that's always the case at the Poetry Foundation, because they're turning the lights off, and we're still scraping up the hors d'oeuvres.
some of our very earliest leader lounges were held in a space in the Fine Arts Building that was a violin maker's shop. And it was a beautiful space overlooking the lake, overlooking Lake Michigan and Michigan Avenue, excuse me. And one of my favorite things about those early experiences were the number of young people, some of my students, some of Nick's students, who would come for the concert. And then after the concert was over, we would all take off our shoes and we would lounge on the rug or lounge on the sofa and share wine together and have the audience, the performers really kind of mingling with some of these young aspiring artists. And that was a really wonderful energy. So I think keeping these receptions as such a core component of what we do is really a holdover from that too. Just this desire to build relationships outside of the performance.
So have there been any, for example, with a festival, there are so many moving parts. So many things that have to happen at the same time, and then everything has to come together, for the concerts and the master classes and whatnot. Have there been any unexpected surprises along the way? And if so, how have you managed to attempt to control that?
Nick Hutchinson?
Yeah, everyone's looking at me. It's really, I have to say, things are always going to come up, but over all of the years, I have been more than impressed by the generosity of our audience, of our donors, the flexibility of all of our artists. I can't ever think of a surprise that's sort of in the classic, like, musician acting like a diva kind of thing. We've never had to deal with that. We've always had people who come with enthusiasm for whatever it is that they're going to perform. The big surprise for me, honestly, coming from a music background and not a business background, is the amount of care you have to take with money. And especially our first few festivals, just really, there were weeks where every evening at the end of everything, I was making sure that we had the right number of dollars to make it through the next day, and we always did. And fortunately, we don't have to manage it quite like that anymore, but I spent a lot more time, on the business side of things than I ever really realized went into an endeavor like this.
Any other surprises along the way?
Well, Nick is being very, very gracious, but we'll never forget the year of the projector. Let's be honest, none of us will ever forget the year of the projector.
Oh my goodness. And figuring out how many lumens were needed. And we designed a special table with legs of different lengths that we went to a carpenter to have built to hold that projector. That was the extent of the adventure with the projector. And again, it's one of those things where it felt absolutely crazy, and trying to put everything together behind the scenes, and hands down, I think it's one of the best attended, most popular, reception that lasted for an hour after the performance kind of presentations that we've done. So it's very worth it. But Frank, you were right before when you talk about going out at the end of the festival and you're almost drunk on euphoria before you get to the point that we're having drinks with each other. Yes. When it's all finally finished.
This was the program with the Schoenberg Book of the Hanging Gardens with dancers, and then the Janacek.
And then the Janacek, right.
Right, with the beautiful projections. So the projector was an issue there. The other issue was the piano. We ended up with I'm remembering all of these issues. It's funny though, it was all of these issues that sort of all happened at once, but it's still one of our most memorable and beloved concerts, I think. And
Wasn't there also a flood?
And there was a flood.
I wasn't there for the flood. I just remember there being a flood.
All in the same venue.
Yeah.
Remarkable. But we pulled it off. It all happened.
We sure did. And actually, I have to say, you and Craig Terry sure did. I mean, you made that toy piano sound like $1 million. You really made that thing punch way above its price point. And the flooding rehearsal, that my mother couldn't make the performance.
That's right.
And so my mother, bless her heart, came to that rehearsal to see so she could get a taste of what we were planning. And oh my God, I mean,
she was a mama bear. She
really was. And I was like, I'm grateful for your strength right now.
Right. Great.
So 10 years. And of course, 10 years for CAIC, a little more than that for the three of you and getting it all started. This anniversary, it's a great time to look back, of course, but then it's also an even better time to look forward to see what's next for this organization. Do we want to keep plugging away doing what we're doing now, which I feel we do extremely well, or do we want to take this as an opportunity to leap off into something else? What are your some of your personal goals for this organization as we look past this 10-year anniversary? I won't call on anyone.
Which is something that we talked about. I forget when we had the giant Chinese food fueled meeting to talk about the next 5 years, but we have discussed this a bit. I love the idea eventually of us having a small venue. Shannon was talking a little bit about the space in the Fine Arts building that we used to use where, we could just sort of stay forever and it was very casual and everyone could mingle together after the performance. I think it would be wonderful to have a space like that eventually that we could use for our leader lounges, for our educational events. That is something that we have a little bit more ownership and control over, and just really to have a home, like a physical home for Art Song in Chicago in kind of a more scaled down way that the Poetry Foundation creates a home for poetry in Chicago. I don't know that we'll end up with $100 million to build a building in that kind of a time frame, but I would love to see us have a space that we can use for just a lot of different things.
With big glass windows and floor to ceiling shelves.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
A library that holds every art song that's ever been written. Right.
Nick, or shall I go? I'll let you have the last word. I'm really, I'm going to take kind of a different approach here. I'm actually really excited. We're living in a difficult moment, obviously, for the country, for the world, and for the arts in particular in this country. But I'm really excited about the potential for Art Song to really embrace this moment with its intimacy and sincerity, its practical scale, right? One singer and one pianist is certainly a more manageable thing during these difficult times than a huge host of people on stage together. Unfortunately, that is what we're facing. And so I'm excited about, I'm predicting that you're going to see a lot of organizations turning to Art Song as a way to kind of get things back on their feet. And so I'm excited that CAIC can be a leader in that in Chicago and in our arts community. And I think that we can do that through traditional song recitals as we've done in the past. I also would love to see us continue to embrace more experimentation with interdisciplinary works like the Schoenberg, like the Janacek, and allowing art song, whether it's songs by Brahms or songs by Berio, to be living, breathing things that exist in the moment. And also, I think we have a responsibility at this moment in time to really embrace humanity and embrace issues of social justice and racial reckoning in this country. And I know that we're all on the same page about that. And I look forward to really leaning into that aspect of our responsibility as artists together as well.
How do you follow that?
I don't know, you know, I set you up. Come
Yeah.
on.
I know, with like profundity that I cannot match. You know, 10 years, I'm extraordinarily proud of where we are and what we've accomplished. I think my personal goals for this organization is that I want to take the next 5 years to really ensure that it has a future, a long future, and a future that goes well beyond us, although I hope that all of us remain with CAIC for a long time. I know I certainly want to. I have a lot of artistic ambitions that I have for the organization that I have yet, that, you know, I would like to see fulfilled, and there's lots of places to go in that department. But I think what I would really love to see over the next 5 years is us fortify the organizational structure of the organization so it can empower us to continue doing excellent work and to continue to grow. We've really prioritized the artistic end of things, and I think that is because it's a musician-run led institution, and of course that is where our priorities go because the mission has to come first. But I think understanding that there needs to be a solid infrastructure, organizationally speaking, within the organization that allows us all to continue to devote the time that we do to it, to keep it going. I think that would be the most amazing thing if we could sort of establish that foundation over the next 5 years so that we can ensure that the organization has another 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 or 50 to go, which is the goal. Because this repertoire, it deserves it, it merits it. It doesn't really have a home quite like this.
Not in Chicago, it certainly doesn't.
Not in Chicago, and not really nationwide. I mean, there are other organizations that are devoted to it, but there are not enough, and a lot of them are young, and so I think it's just like we are, and I think we need to ensure that, you know, we grow old, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, of course, that brought me into this organization. The fact that no one else in the city was doing this at this level consistently. I work for an organization who, of course, occasionally presents, you know, vocal recitals in a much different environment. You know, 2,600 seats, and it's hard to fill those 2,600 seats for a vocal recital unless it's a Jesse Norman, a Kathleen Battle, a Leontine Price, and et cetera. And because of that, we don't produce them as much because it just doesn't have the draw. So I was drawn to CAIC for that very reason, because it happens, it happens so well, and it's such a high level and so consistently that I really wanted to be a part of it. And that's why I'm sitting here right now. And that's why I will continue to sit here as long as you guys will have me.
We are grateful. I will say, actually, there was a really, speaking of the organization for who you work for,
yep.
There was a moment early on in CAIC's history when I actually was engaged to sing Schumann's Dichte Liebe with Jeremy Dank on the stage of the CSO.
And I turned pages.
You turned pages.
That's right.
And it was really early on in what we were doing here at CAIC. And, you know, I kind of had a sense that there was room for growth within the city of Chicago for this repertoire. But I remember walking off stage, and the man who runs the presenting series at the Chicago Symphony, Jim
Fahey,
said to me as we walked off stage, he said, you know, I think that's the first time we've heard a complete song cycle on the stage of the CSO in almost a decade.
He was right.
And that that was shocking to me because I remember when I made my professional debut just like 11 years earlier, it was with the Chicago Symphony.
Yep.
And I remember being in my dressing room and there was a bouquet of flowers left over from the night before. And it was from the person who actually is my manager now, which at the time seemed like an unattainable dream. But it was from the woman who is my manager now, and it was for one of her artists who was Anne-Sophie von Otter, who had just given a solo recital on the stage of the Chicago Symphony the night before. So
I turned pages for that too.
It's a very important job.
Yes.
I actually have a picture of it hanging on the wall over here. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's amazing. So that really underlined to me, A, how quickly things can change, and B, how important it is that we have been doing what we've been doing. Which, you know, when you're starting out something and you have no experience, you know, you don't really know. You can't really know. You just have to trust your gut, and that was very validating. So
we are live on Facebook, right?
Yes, we are.
Have there been any?
There have been some lovely comments. We have from our beloved community here. We have Stephen Wang says he misses all of us.
Oh yes. So for those of you out there, hi Stephen. Stephen was on our board for a couple of years until he had to move to Australia. So we miss you terribly, Stephen. And actually, that's right. Stephen was supposed to come back to Chicago to hear the Ring Cycle at Lyric this past spring, and we were all going to get together. So fingers crossed that happens soon.
We also have hellos from Terry and Bob Ryan from San Francisco, and Jane Bonnell, from Tyler Duncan, Jim Fogle.
Oh, yay.
Brian Law is also saying hello. Wonderful. And our newest board member, John, is saying that you have a doctorate in page turning. So the comments are vibrant. Lisa Saishan, who is also on our advisory board, was very excited about Barrio, which, truth be told, is an inside joke, but I'll explain that some other time. So yeah, but if anybody has any questions on Facebook, you know, please ask them in these comments, because we have a few minutes for that. But Frank, are there more questions that you have for us?
The only other question I have, of course, we have a little festival coming up. Is there what are you most looking forward to on this for our upcoming festival that's going to happen a little differently this year? Of course, it's all going to be online. We're going to spread it out over the course of 3 weeks. Am I
4 weeks? 4 weekends.
So instead of a 1 weekend with 3 concerts and a masterclass ish, it's going to be spread out and available online. But what are you, the 3 of you, what are you most looking forward to for the upcoming festival?
Well, I'll start so that Shannon and Nick can be profound, because what I'm looking forward to most is that I will get to sit and watch every single performance and the masterclass from one end to the other and not run around worrying about, setting up the reception and making sure the audience gets in comfortably and all of that. So if there's any kind of silver lining to everything that we're going through, that's, the comfort with which everyone can watch these performances in their own home is one of them.
I'm excited that we kick off the festivities with a masterclass featuring the wonderful pianist Myra Huang, who has graced our stages multiple times and who you heard Nick Hutchinson mention earlier. She's a phenomenal artist, a great human being, and we have a terrific lineup of singers and pianists from in and around Chicago participating in a masterclass led by Myra, devoted exclusively to women poets and composers who are women of color. And so that's particularly exciting. We'll hear some repertoire that we hardly ever get to hear. And that promises to be very inspiring. And I'm excited that we're kicking off the festival with that educational program. I'm excited to play too. I get to play. So I'm always happy when that happens.
Nick Phan, can you talk just a little bit about the theme of this year's festival?
Sure. So we are celebrating, and this actually was Shannon's idea, and thank you for the inspiration, Shannon. We are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution. And that amendment is the amendment that gave women the right to vote. So in order to commemorate that through song, we decided to look at or feature only songs by women composers. And researching this festival blew my mind. I mean, I think I've always known of women composers here and there throughout history, but it was really mind-boggling to realize just how many actually there have been. And we're spanning 4.5 centuries of music, and there was no way to fit in all the good music that I found. There are entire composers who we can't fit in because there's just no room, because otherwise people will be sitting at their computers until 2022. And I'm actually, again, I'm very grateful to Shannon because we talked through a lot of this, and we kept telling ourselves, like, we've got to fit so and so in or so and so in. And I was actually really quite proud of us because I realized, Shannon reminded me, she's like, we have actually programmed a lot of these composers before. So it doesn't feel necessarily like a giant loss to not be able to fit in Clara Schumann, because she's been on our programs multiple times.
Yep.
And I mean, that's just one example. So there's been something about the experience of putting this together that has been really validating about what we do. It underlines that diversity and representation have always been priorities for us. And it's amazing to have this opportunity to really shine a spotlight in this particular direction. There's this fallacy that the music that these women have written is subpar for some reason, and it's just patently not true. It's just the way we sort of, sexism seeps its way through a myth of meritocracy. And I'm excited to showcase some of these women's music because some of these people, most people haven't heard of. And I'm particularly excited. We're going to start the first performance is a program of Baroque composers. And so there's a bunch of Venetian women who are featured, including Barbara Strozzi, who I feel like when I was studying music history, she was mentioned as an outlier, as, oh, there was a woman composer. Her name was Barbara Strozzi, and she wrote some things. But what she wrote is amazing. It turns out she was the most published composer in her lifetime, which is more than people like Caccini. And it turns out there were actually a lot of women composers in Venice during that time period. And some of them have extraordinary stories. There is an amazing composer that we're featuring on that concert named Antonia Bembo, who for marital reasons, had to flee Venice to go to France. And there she got to France, and she somehow ended up being taken care of by the King of France. And he became her patron, and she devoted a book of songs to him. And we're going to do some of those. I mean, there are extraordinary stories behind these songs, and the songs are extraordinarily beautiful. So I'm very excited about that. The second concert, we fast forward after our little trip to France via Antonia Bembo. We're going to stay in France, and we're going to look at the women who are composing in Paris around the turn of last century. So the Boulanger sisters, Pauline Viardot, who actually, she was composing well before the Belle Epoque, but into it. Who am I forgetting? Germaine Taillefer, the only woman member of Les Six, the famous French group of composers, and Cécile Chaminade, who was the first woman to be awarded the Légion d'honneur, which is one of the highest honors in France. And then after that, we look at the 20th century largely through the lens of American women composers. We do have one composer she was born in Belize, and she lives in the UK. And her name is Erilyn Wallen. So we're going to do the Midwest premiere of a piece called Roundel by her. There's another Midwestern premiere that features Czech-American composer Iva Bytová. That is an amazing piece. So there's a lot of great music. And again, we're spanning 4.5 centuries of music, and there's really a wide variety of styles, yet all of it is beautifully composed and stunningly gorgeous to listen to.
And there's also a Chicago composer in the mix,
Yes,
right?
there is a Chicago composer in the mix.
Our good friend?
Our good friend Stacey Garrett. She actually has composed this amazing.
Two Chicago composers, Stacey Garrett and Margaret Bonds. Sorry.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah, of course.
There are
yeah.
4 Chicago composers on that concert.
Right.
Stacey, Margaret.
But the one who's living is Stacey Garrett.
Yeah.
And she is our good friend. So she's written an amazing song cycle called In Eleanor's Words, which is based on the writings of Eleanor Roosevelt. And we have a wonderful mezzo-soprano coming to perform it her name is Amanda Lynn Bottoms. And she's currently at the Washington National Opera at the Kennedy Center in their Young Artist program. And Shannon and I met her in Philadelphia earlier in January, and she's stunning. Everybody's gonna love her. The other 3 Chicago composers are Florence Price,
Of course.
and Margaret Bonds. And then also Ruth Crawford Seeger, who actually studied in Chicago. So yes, lots of Chicago connections on that last concert, which we are always trying to underline because, you know, Chicago is a very important place in the history of American classical music.
Indeed.
So I don't, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't have any more formal questions on my handy dandy list, but is there anything that we haven't covered any parting shots from any of you?
I would just say just as much as we were talking about, we're just going to talk over each other for a few minutes. It's great. I was just going to jump onto the Chicago connections, that as much as we have for this festival, Chicago composers and a lot of Chicago musicians, I'm really excited about the fact that these are going to be a series of performances that no matter where you are in the world, and we just heard a list of some of our supporters who are in Australia and California and Michigan, no matter where you are this fall, you can see everything that we're doing, all our educational events, all of our performance events, and we've not really been able to do that before.
Yeah, I think this little period of time that we're in, it's really going to change how concerts are produced even after the quarantine is over. I think there's always going to be this virtual element in concert production moving forward, or at least the expectation of some kind of virtual involvement. I think we're really setting the stage here, pun intended, to how things are going to look in our future.
You got back to that 5-year plan, Frank.
Always the chair of the board.
Yes. And rightfully so.
That's right.
Any other comments from
Shannon, do you
Facebook?
have parting thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
I have used up all of my profundity for the evening.
Fair enough.
So we don't have any questions on Facebook because our friends know and love us so well. So what I will part with, though, is I just want to talk about a couple things that are coming up. So this conversational series is going to be a thing that it's a new adventure for us. We're going to do it mostly weekly. The next installment will be a week from tonight at the same time, and we're going to feature our first Fall Leader Lounge artists, Jonathan Johnson and Craig Terry. And I will be in conversation with them, and we're going to learn all about their life stories and also all about their program, which is going to air a week from tomorrow on the same platform, Facebook Live, and also on YouTube, and also on our website. And that will stream through all next weekend from September 18th through September 20th. You can, if you miss the broadcast premiere, you are able to watch it and stream it on demand as you wish, that particular concert, and probably this conversation, as long as there are no technical glitches. And then the following week after that, I'm going to be in conversation with Shannon again, and also with Myra, and we're going to talk about women at the piano and the experience of women as pianists who play mostly for singers and also work in the collaborative world in general, which I'm sure will provide a lot of fascinating insight, and I'm excited to have that conversation as we look forward to our festival weeks, which will come shortly after that. So that's what's coming up for us over the next couple of weeks, and we actually have a lot going on, so we hope to see a lot of you all online.
So yeah, please take a look at the website, Facebook, Instagram. There's a lot of great information that Nick has been posting, a lot of supplemental information about a lot of the composers. And we're also going to be, I believe, posting information about our artists. So keep an eye on all of those channels for what's coming up and how to stay engaged.
Great.
Thank you, Frank.
And thanks so much for joining us tonight. This has been fun. This has been a much more interesting Thursday night than usual.
Thank you so much for shepherding us through this conversation.
Thanks so much.
Indeed, thank you.
It's my privilege.
Okay, bye Facebook.
Bye,
we will
Facebook.
see you all
everybody.
soon.
See you later.
Okay, we're not live anymore.
Okay, come stop
Okay,
smiling.
good.